It starts at the beginning of the project. You actually plan for commissioning. In fact, the best schedules I've seen have been backwards facing schedules where you have when is my turnover date? When is my drop dead date for turnover? Let's work backwards from that. Or a new commissioning engineer, I tell them all the time, the only constant in commissioning is change.
You can normally tell if a GC sent their kind of A team or C team. So for the GC
Absolutely.
leaders maybe listening, what are those actual signals? Like what does an A team look like in the first 30 days that a C team does not?
Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to step up and say, hey, maybe this isn't the best way to do things. Let's think of something else.
All right, so Tim, you've been doing commissioning for 30 years. I think I imagine a little bit
Plus or
has
minus, yeah.
changed in that time. What has changed the most in maybe the last few years that maybe nobody outside of commissioning would really get caught up to?
Um, Speed to turnover.
Yeah.
The commissioning has always been in the time I've been doing it, and to clarify some things, my main background is in power generation.
Hmm.
So I've built power plants anywhere from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia to Oklahoma City and Boston and all over the U.S. too. So commissioning has always been an area where we lost 2 weeks on the base build. Oh, let's pull it from commissioning. Oh, we lost $1 million on budget for this or that. Oh, let's pull it from commissioning. So by the time you get to actual startup and commissioning activities, you're $1 late and a day short. So it's always been that way, and that's just something that we commissioning engineers just we know that going into it, and it's just going to, and we plan on that. Whenever I'm writing a commissioning schedule, I always I write it with the understanding that we are going to have shortfalls. It's not going to go the way it was scheduled in the very beginning, bid format. So, but here lately, especially in the data center world, with the speed that we're building and the magnitude of data centers that we're building, commissioning is a struggle. It is a struggle to get not to do it, but to do it right
Yeah.
and to maintain the quality that's expected by the end users and the clients.
I mean, I can imagine like a time and maybe even a vertical mission critical specifically where, in industry, time is always of the essence, but in the sub industry, which is mission critical and data center delivery, it's even more so. How did you get into commissioning? Like, what was the path to commissioning? Obviously, you had power gen as a background. Did you just gain an expertise that kind of got you slotted there?
Well, when I was I was a nuclear operator in the Navy on submarines
Yeah.
right out of high school. The first submarine that I was assigned to was the USS Kentucky, and that's a Trident submarine, and I was assigned to it as the eighth crew member on board. So it was still on stilts in the yard, still had massive hull cuts all over the place. So I actually got involved in commissioning there
Hmm.
on that submarine. I saw the process, which is vastly different than what we do in data centers or buildings or anything like that. There was no talk of ASHRAE or those type of standards or those type of levels of commissioning. It was just jump in and do it, start doing your inspections and start doing your function tests and things like that. So that was my first at maybe what was I about 21 years old was my first time of commissioning. Fast forward, I was in the Navy 10 years. Fast forward and get to probably in 1999. When I got out of the Navy, I went to work for Nucor Steel. There was a little bit of commissioning there. That was in Indiana, one of the, if not the largest steel producer in the United States right now. Little bit of commissioning in there because we were constantly altering designs and adding new equipment and things like that. But it was not a massive facility commissioning. It wasn't until I took a job with Progress Energy, who is now Duke. Duke had bought Progress while I was there, that I got into power plant commissioning. And we had one 2-on-1 combined cycle power block that had just gone commercial when I hired on. And we built 3 more while I was there. So over the course of the next 5, 6, 7 years or whatever, I was very heavily involved from an O&M standpoint in commissioning there. Once we were built up fully and got into just routine operations, I got bored. So that's when I saw an opportunity to go as a lead commissioning engineer to Kuwait with GE. And I was there for about 3 years. Progress from the lead commissioning engineer to commissioning manager to site manager in that 3-year period. And so that was a trial by fire in rapid commissioning there. Did another power and water plant in Saudi, and then I did several other sites here in the U.S. before I joined with QTS.
So maybe for the listeners who aren't as familiar with commissioning, I think we talked about, we've got a lot of folks on the GC side who listen. And, I think from a GC perspective, I was a PM at Whiting Turner for a number of years. I think often we can think of the build process as the structure, right? And the things that go inside the structure. And then the powering of the equipment is kind of like a block at the end that you're just like, hey, it's going to happen. But maybe like walk us through why that has become a bit more like intentional in terms of how we approach it. But maybe just talk through what that handoff looks like between the GC and QTS and back and forth.
Okay. The GC, there's not, for us right now, there's not really a handoff from the GC to commissioning. It's all a workflow environment where it all happens at the same time. The biggest thing is commissioning really, in my opinion, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but commissioning started due to, it's kind of like OSHA. Every OSHA regulation was written in somebody's blood somewhere. Commissioning was written in failures somewhere in the past. We started this piece of equipment up and the smoke came out. Listen, how do we make it so the smoke doesn't come out anymore? Oh, well, we need to test it beforehand. We need to do inspections. We need to have actual QA/QC before that. Commissioning is very much a QA/QC centric activity. So that starts upon the arrival of the first piece of equipment on that site. Commissioning is a lot of fairly experienced, really, project managers see commissioning as, oh, this is the last 6, 8, 10 weeks, whatever, of the project, and I don't even need to pay attention to it because it's just going to happen. And that's totally not true. It starts at the beginning of the project. You actually plan for commissioning. In fact, the best schedules I've seen have been backwards facing schedules where you have, when is my turnover date? When is my drop dead date for turnover? Let's work backwards from that, including all the commissioning steps needed. That way you can now adjust your build schedule that you thought was perfect. But now you see that, oh, I've got to start up this first, then this, then this, then this. It's in a sequential fashion, which means I have to alter my build schedule that I thought I was going to have and build in that sequence. So there's still a lot of people in the construction field that don't quite understand that. And I don't blame them because, quite honestly, there are no real, you don't go to university and get a degree in commissioning. You don't, there's not a lot of real good training or certification programs out there. You can get ASHRAE certified. There's some commissioning professional certifications you can get out there. But in reality, most commissioning engineers that I know and that I've ran into and that I work with have kind of fell into it like I did. It's hey, we got this stuff to do. Can you do it? And you accept the challenge and go for it, and all of a sudden you're in commissioning.
Well, and I think it also hits an area of weakness in a lot of kind of GC field staff, which is MEP, right? There's a lot of like carpentry backgrounds that are represented in the field. And there's a complexity to the MEP side that you kind of veer away from at times.
Right.
What are some of the ingredients? You've interacted with a lot of projects, interacted with a lot of GCs. You mentioned the idea of starting, the commissioning process really does start with equipment arrival. What are the ingredients where you've seen GCs create a really successful environment for commissioning success? What are some of the other ingredients?
Some of the other ingredients are number one is getting commissioning involved from the very beginning of the project, not just not just when the concrete is dried and the steel is already erected and we're moving things in, but even before that in design. One of the last projects I did before I got into the data center world was with KBR. In fact, I can't even say I did that project because that was right when COVID hit and everything shut down. But I was brought in as a commissioning manager for a LNG plant that was going to be built in just south of New Orleans. On that plant were two 550 megawatt combined cycle plants. So that was going to be a totally off-grid site, and it was about 1,100, 1.1 gig that was necessary to run that facility. I was brought in. This was a 5-year project, and I was brought in early in year one before design had even stopped or finished. The reason for that is the vice president of commissioning with KBR was very interested in making sure that when we're designing piping systems, do we have the design set so that flushing of that pipe would be, we're not having any cut into pipe. We already have flanges, we already have valves set in place in the design, the initial design, so that we can start flushing as early as possible and not have to worry about breaking the integrity of the system to do that. So those were, and I've been on a couple of them like that before, and those were very successful projects because we did bring to the table things that maybe the design engineers don't think about when they're designing systems. A lot of times, especially nowadays, I mean, it used to be that a design engineer was a field engineer for at least 3 years. So they got to go out in the field and see what was what. They saw the snags, they saw the design flaws maybe, because they're right there looking at them and having to figure out how to correct them. Now it seems like design engineers come right out of college, and everybody wants to sit at a desk and use Autodesk or AutoCAD or something like that right off the bat, not go in the field and get muddy.
Yeah, right.
So I think those projects were some of the best I've been on from start to finish, because and of course we don't get it perfect every time either.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of things that a good commissioning group can bring to the table in early design that will help the project go smoother and possibly prevent some of the delays that happen because they weren't thought of before.
Well, and I think in my own experience, I think some of the things that can derail commissioning is when there's finger pointing, right? Whether it's the electrician looking at someone who actually set the equipment, or vice versa. So how do you, I mean, maybe speak to just how you try and influence the culture and maybe and create a culture of partnership around commissioning so that that doesn't happen.
Well, it happens from both sides sometimes, right? It happens from the commissioning group as well as the
Yep.
construction group and the trade partners and things like that. So so we're commissioning's not faultless in that area either. You're always going to have, I think, a little bit of that happen, because especially when push comes to shove and schedules slip to the right, and you're looking at incredible deadlines that you got to meet in a shorter amount of time than what you had. I think it's just natural human nature to start trying to blame shift. But to prevent that, or to minimize that, what I always talk to my commissioning managers and commissioning engineers about is we're I don't care if you're part of the owner, or you're the GC, or you're one of the trade partners, the MC or the EC, whatever. At the time we're in the field, we are all working on the same goal. We all have the same goal, and that's meet that turnover date, meet that handover date. And as long as we keep our attitudes correct and don't get upset by, if people are trying to blame shift on us, or if other people, if you have that stuff going on site, ignore the noise. Ignore the noise and just do your job. Just continue to do your job as best as you can, and help others in other areas as best as you can also, without seeming like you're trying to walk in and take over, or walk in and show them the faults or the flaws in their processes. Just always have an attitude of teamwork and helpfulness.
All right, sponsor break. Lars, real quick. When was the last time you got a new set of drawings from an architect and they didn't cloud anything?
Well, the one that cost me a couple $100,000 was back, I think, in 2017. So, yeah, lesson learned there.
Yeah, so what I like about what Trick Tools is building is they're looking at tools to help kind of remove the mundane from the job site. And I, same as you, every time there was a bulletin or an addendum, I would go back to the designers and ask them to at least highlight or give me a cover letter on the changes. And that was always like pulling like teeth. But Trunk Tools is now automating that. So you get a bulletin come in, it automatically highlights the changes. You don't have to do a thing.
Well, it's also hitting RFIs, right? It's also hitting submittals. And when we think about standardizing ops, right, and providing that, sort of resource to those field operators, what I see it as, it's sort of like this like mentor within the company that structures, standardizes, keeps it moving in the right direction, looks out for risk. And just this last week, I had a QC manager just pass along a submittal to an owner without doing a review because he was too busy, and it was wrong. And the classic owner statement is, "Did you even review this?" Right? So this to me is carte blanche. We absolutely did. And think about getting that first pass before your field manager ever even actually has to do the first pass. Someone's doing it for them. So to me, it's about speed. It increases accuracy and helps standardize ops out in the field, right?
Yeah, and this is the kind of AI that we've talked about on the podcast, really appreciating, right? Which is looking at ways to elevate the craftsman at the heart of project delivery.
Give me time back so I can be out in the field managing risk, right?
Yeah, makes sense. So, I mean, it seems like there's two kind of opposite forces at play, which is on one hand, you've got the need for increased speed and delivery of these facilities. And on the other hand, you've got an increased kind of understanding of the importance of commissioning these pieces of equipment well and being intentional. Has that required for you guys to get kind of creative in how you make those two realities align?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had to think outside, and that's when I'm interviewing a new commissioning manager or a new commissioning engineer, I tell them all the time, the only constant in commissioning is change. That's the only constant. You're constantly going to have to be on your toes and try to think outside the box. You want to get the same thing done, but maybe in a different way. And that's been a little bit difficult for, I guess, people in my generation, because we can be so set in how we do things. And maybe it's
Yeah.
not even just my generation, it may just be another human thing. You
Yeah,
get
right.
set in how you do it, and you start thinking about, hey, well, last project we didn't do it this way. You got to get rid of that mindset and look at each project as an individual item, and how are we going to improve from the last one? How are we going to be faster but still provide the quality that is necessary, that the client wants, that our company demands,
Yeah.
in handover, and just be willing to collaborate with different groups that maybe you never even thought you would collaborate with before.
Mm.
Use your CXAs. They probably have more experience than you do,
Mm.
at least the project managers from CXAs. Use them to the best of their ability and leverage from them, and find out what they've done on other projects that they may have experienced the same thing you're going through. Don't build something new if there's already something out there that you can use.
Hmm. One of the things that we talked about was, this idea of kind of working with the end in mind. And if the end in mind is a fully operational building that is, you know, has a long life cycle to it, how much interaction do you have with the kind of user FM side of these buildings to inform how well maybe the current commissioning processes are working. Is that kind of a dynamic relationship that you have?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing is building relationships not with just the general contractor and the trade partners, but building those relationships with the end user, with the client. Hold on.
Ooh, we got a dog reference. That's great.
Okay, I'm back.
Hey.
Had a electrical group that put a generator plug on the outside of my house and I put the wrong gender on. And they were
Oh
supposed
boy.
to call me before they showed up today, so but they didn't.
Yeah, been there. But so I think you were talking through the role of kind of interacting with your FM team and how that kind of dynamically informs what you guys kind of develop from a playbook standpoint.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I've seen that really stifles a project and can negatively affect a schedule is the lack of communication. You have these silos, and they don't want to come out of their silos. If you can break through those silos, and even if we have to be the mediator, between the different trade partners or whatever, we do that in order to try to solve problems and get the schedule back on track.
What I mean with the point of the value of how you integrate commissioning into early phases of the project, um, how well does that happen? I mean, does some of that come down to how well the project team kind of responds to this kind of partnership culture that's being created, or
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. And you have different levels of partnerships that exist organically depending on the contractors that are out there. There are some contractors that are very much in line with a total and complete partnership with all parties from the very beginning. And you have others that, you hired us to do a job, we're going to do it. We don't need any help from anybody. In fact, we don't want you here. That type of attitude, and it's difficult to break into that. But what we're, again, like I said before, with us just being persistent in trying to be helpful and not a hindrance, a lot of times uh, project managers will see a commissioning as, well, you're gonna get in, you're gonna totally screw up my schedule.
yeah,
So you've got a timeline to be here. We don't want you here before that timeline. But that's kind of disappearing, at least around in the areas where I'm at now.
Hmm.
It was a difficult thing to break into with QTS at first because we were just starting to take off and grow at the speed that we're growing now. And it was a little difficult because everybody was very concerned about any kind of blip on the schedule. But as we got involved with the different groups and they saw that we're there to help, we're not there to stop anything. We're not just going to throw stones, and I tell my guys, I said, look, don't come up with a problem unless you have a solution. Have at least one solution that you can offer with that problem so that we're not just throwing stones at everybody and saying you're not doing your job right. Let's come up with something and let's figure it out how to get it done.
Well, in one of our calls, you mentioned that normally within the first month or two, you can normally tell if a GC sent their kind of A team or C team. So for the GC
Absolutely.
leaders maybe listening, what are those actual signals? Like, what does an A team look like in the first 30 days that a C team does not?
An A team in the first 30 days looks like they have a very, very well thought out schedule. Scheduling is everything. And we have been in month 8 without a schedule before. And I don't know how things get done, honestly, without a, and I'm not talking about a real pretty P6 schedule. Come up with a really good milestone schedule that is actually followed,
Yeah.
that we can see. Get with the CXA to do your detailed micro schedule for the different levels of commissioning. That will help you build your construction schedule, as I said before. And most of them know, most of the good ones will already have a duration schedule built. So you
Yeah.
can see those durations. It's going to take me X amount of hours to do a PDU, X amount of hours to do a diesel, X amount of hours to do a UPS. They'll already know that. They've done that so many times that it's just second nature to them. Use them also to help you get that backward facing schedule if that's where you have to go.
Are you a last planner kind of guy? Do you like to do the work stream kind of to it, stickies, grab the stickies, work to a milestone, everyone kind of identifies their activities and day to
No,
2 day type
not
activities?
so much, not so much that. I mean, I have done that before. I've even
Yeah.
done the old, I don't even remember what they call it, the chart that you write up on a massive whiteboard, a schedule that you write up there.
Tax planning kind of
Yeah,
setup.
yeah, kind of.
Yep.
But we don't do that much anymore because number one, it just is not practical to do that anymore because at the speed that we're building, you're constantly going to have a couple of people that all they do is revise that schedule all the time.
Yeah.
And that's just counterproductive. We know what has to be done. Pour concrete, put steel up, put the shell on, start setting equipment, right?
Yeah.
We know what has to be done. It's just getting the right equipment set and ready to go at the right amount of time seems to be a struggle for some groups.
So,
They see the building, they might see the building and the individual data halls in there as one thing.
right.
So let's go in and let's set all the craws. Now let's go in and let's set all the chillers and get them all piped in before we even start anything up. Well, everything is being built in a phased environment now. Look at your first phase, and when the turnover is, get your first phase done early while you're working on the other phases. It seems like that's a very simple concept,
Yeah.
but it's very difficult for some of them to execute.
I mean, that's a huge point. I mean, I think it took me a few years to realize, like, even just looking at the levels of commissioning, right? Like level 3 is, powers on, and you know this better than I do. But level 4 is you're now doing a systems check, right?
Right.
Maybe, walk through those different levels, like 3 through 5. Has much changed in the nature of those levels, or is it mainly the steps are the steps, and maybe how you get there is really the creativity part?
The steps haven't, yeah, that's the creativity part is how you get there. And more we're trying to do, if we have a level 4 schedule set up where we're doing a COD board, a UPS, a diesel, switchgear, and that's it. Let's try to get it all done together at the same time. You minimize how much load bank time you're needing. You minimize how often you're having to transfer load banks or shift load banks around and cables and all that. That's all time consumers. Try to get it a lineup, a complete lineup done at once, and start testing on that right then and there, because that's gonna do nothing but aid your schedule.
Do you find that when you're interacting with GCs, is there a bit of training that happens, or do they inherently kind of understand the commissioning process?
Again, it depends on if they've sent their A team or their C team.
Yeah.
It really does. The big thing in everybody's world right now is manpower, right? Qualified manpower, experienced manpower. So, and it's not, it hits us too. It hits us as a commissioning group too. Is we've had to make some alterations. We've had to decide that, you know what, we're going to have a training platform within our organization, because I know I'm not going to be able to hire and retain enough commissioning engineers to do all the jobs we're doing over the course of the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So we've developed a training platform where we're bringing people in and saying, okay, well, 3 years ago we weren't hiring anybody that didn't have experience at commission, and we're going to train you on this. And I think that other organizations, from the GCs to your trade partners, your vendors, everybody is up against the same thing. I couldn't count how many times we've gone out and seen a vendor startup technician on YouTube on his phone trying to figure out how to start his equipment up. I mean, that's happened over and over, and you shake your head at it, but the reality is these guys are in demand everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're few and far between. And I think we're seeing the results of maybe a decade ago or whatever, where everybody thought that, well, the most important thing you can do in your life is get a good college degree and go into computer science.
Yeah.
That's almost a dead industry now,
Yeah.
right? That's almost dead. And the trades have suffered because of that. So finding good trade qualified and trade experienced people is difficult. One thing we're doing as a company is we're partnering with some of these. We have a group. One of my guys, in fact, is heavily involved in local high schools and with the school board in trying to develop not necessarily a data center centric trade program in the high school that he actually graduated from, but more of a trade centric, because in all reality, if we are training people on HVAC, if we're training them on electrical, if we're training this, even if they don't come to our organization, chances are they're going to be hired by one of our vendors that's going to be on one of our projects eventually, or in the maintenance world for our operations group. So it just benefits us all to help train these and educate these young people coming right out of high school in order to do this.
Well, and the data suggests that they're starting to come, right? I was reading one kind of trade publication that showed a 23% increase from Gen Z kind of entering into different trade programs, which is exciting to hear. But to your point, it's going to take some time. And I think I've also gotten into a habit of just looking, if you see something being fixed, whether it's at the airport, at your house, they're most likely over the age of 50. And I think it's a crazy kind of we're starting to see the manifestation of the labor crisis that we've talked about in the industry for a long time, and that's showing up in a lot of different ways. What is when you look at kind of that reality, and think about some of the interactions that you've had with GCs and maybe the disconnect at times, does that inform how QTS is looking at how to more holistically involve themselves in managing a project?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that we've taken more of an interest in instead of just hiring and monitoring budgets and schedules, we're actually getting more and more involved in the day-to-day routine of what's going on in the field. I know my team is. My team is very much a field-oriented team. We'll have offices on site, and I tell them, you better not spend more than 30 minutes in that office a day, or you're not getting things done. So we are the owner. We're not the ones who are flipping valves and opening and closing breakers, but we are the ones who are out there looking at level 2. When you do a inspection on a piece of equipment that just arrived, did you actually do it, or did you just pencil whip the checklist? Can we go in and look at CX Alloy or whatever commissioning platform you use, and we see 45 checklists that were all done within 2 minutes of each other? Is that happening? That's what we focus on, because when that happens, especially on level 2, when you get into NETA testing, when you get into the set in place inspections, things like that, if those aren't done properly, that's going to hold up going into level 3, and that holds up going into level 4. So if we can find that stuff earlier on in the project that's happening, and we can get it addressed, and usually it's not a something that somebody's doing just because they're being malicious. It's just a lack of education. It's a lack of understanding why it's so important to do that correctly. And when we can get there and we can educate people and we can mentor them in that area, it makes proceeding through the rest of the levels much, much smoother and actually aids our schedule.
Well, and you kind of mentioned this with CX Alloy, but what's the role of data play in being able to understand the life cycle of even a piece of equipment and how that translates to your ability to problem solve and get through these commission steps?
It's incredibly important, because as we're going through, you can create issues in CX Alloy at any step of the way. We monitor all that. We monitor when an issue was created, when it was actually acknowledged by the responsible party, and when it was resolved. especially critical issues. We also monitor, and we have a CX alloy standard now that dictates what is a critical versus a non-critical issue, whereas before it was just kind of willy-nilly. If I think it's critical, it's critical. Oh, somebody else said it's non-critical, I'll change it. So we have a very strict policy on changing a critical issue to a non-critical issue. It takes several layers of approval to do that. So I think that, I may not be answering your question correctly, but I think that being able to look at a project that has maybe 15,000 checklists in CX Alloy, that's impossible to look at all of them every day. We do have an AI component in there that's going and helping us look at that and pointing things out to us on a daily basis of irregularities. And that allows us to concentrate on areas where it's really important. But being able to follow that not only helps the project, but it helps the operations group once we go into turnover, because they use that as their baseline for all the equipment going forward. Anything from, if you didn't record the right serial number and model number and serial number of that chiller in the very beginning when it's set in place, 2 years later when they're doing an asset evaluation, now all of a sudden they're looking at it going, well, where is this serial number? Where this is not the right, and it really throws a kink in an audit that may come at a later date. So it's very important for the documentation to be correct. It's very important for it to be filled out thoroughly and in sequential order. The other thing is, we found a lot of times in the middle, like you have a UPS go bad in level 3 as soon as you turn it on. You have a PDU go bad, and we change that out. Now that's got a new serial number. If you didn't record that all the way through, then 2-3 years later, when you're doing that audit, all of a sudden you see the serial number that's not right, which could have been easily corrected in commissioning. And now ops has to do this investigative back trail to try to figure out what happened, when did it happen, and where did that other piece of equipment go.
Do you have a perspective on like the COBie format?
No, I'm not familiar with that, actually.
So it's just a format of data, and I think I was on a project recently where it had a reference to a COBie requirement. It's a big spreadsheet, and it kind of details out exactly all the different ways that equipment information and asset data can be stored and translated, and with a common nomenclature for kind of facilities and maintenance. But I think
I know what you're talking about now.
so like my takeaway from being on this site was, in the age of APIs and CX alloys and even MCPs and AI, we are still so reliant on a variety of Excel sheets that don't communicate with each other. And I can imagine your teams are inundated with a lot of different data inputs. Is CX alloy improving that experience for your team?
It is. As long as the big thing is, CX alloy requires that human element to enter the data correctly, right? If the data is not entered correctly, CX alloy is not going to correct it. And it may be it may be something you can detect with an AI investigation, and it may not be. The other thing is, we have a lot of groups that they don't want to fill in, because serial numbers, they can be that long. They don't want to fill that in, so they just take a picture of the nameplate and say, well, that's good enough, you have it there. But they've taken a picture with their phone when they're jiggling or something. Or
there's bright sun.
And you can't read it, and AI can't even go in and read it if it's not there. So it's very important that is, and we require it on every checklist. Every checklist has, the nameplate data on it, and then maybe even some more data depending on what the piece of equipment is. And we require it on every checklist, and it has to translate from one to the next to the next. And AI will be able to find that and flag that as a potential problem.
Sponsor break. If you spend any time running a project, the answer is almost always sitting in the contract document somewhere. The catch is that it's almost never in one document. It's split across the contract, the specs, and some flow down clause 3 layers deep that nobody connects until it's already cost money. That's the whole premise behind Document Crunch. That risk doesn't live inside any single document. It lives in the gaps between them. and most teams never look at all of them together until they're standing in a dispute. The average construction dispute in the U.S. now runs about $60 million, according to Arcadis. It's a lot of money. And the root cause they point to isn't fraud or bad intent. It's people not fully understanding what they agreed to. So Document Crunch built a platform around closing that gap. Crunch AI reads the documents, surfaces the risks, and it cites the exact page and clause. That's big. So you're not just taking its word for it. Project Assist lets your team act on it, ask questions across the entire project document set, and draft your submittals, notices, and RFIs right from the chat window. And the whole thing runs on your own company standards. So the office and the field are working off the same playbook for bid through closeout. No disconnects. It's live now across the US and Canada. Go to documentcrunch.com/construction conversations and book a demo.
So, I know we're kind of running out of time, and there's a couple questions I want to get to. And one of them is, like, again, a part of our audience is project managers and supers and maybe a PX. And so, like, for them listening, maybe early younger ones, what would you tell them about what they should care about as it relates to commissioning, as they're trying to learn the whole industry, right? And from a PM standpoint, it was kind of hammered into my head, schedule and budget, mainly budget.
Yeah.
Right. And so commissioning always seemed a little fringe. MEP seemed a little fringe. I knew I needed to get more information about it because it was a big risk item for me. But yeah, I guess what would you say to them, the newer PE even into the industry who's learning things, in terms of maybe how commissioning plays a role in the project success?
One thing I tell everybody to remember is that whether it's a project that is 11 months or whether it's a project that is 5 years, it's the same. Remember that the owner or the end user or the client is probably not going to be there in the early stages en masse, looking at every single thing that you do. They're not going to be there walking around on site with their clipboards and watching you. So that spool of 750 MCM cable that came in a month late or whatever early on, they may or may not remember that. What they're going to remember is the last 2 months of the project when they are there and they are watching function testing and they are watching things that work or don't work based on the design and the sequence of operations. That's what they're going to remember. That's what they're going to see. So not only is that critical for a nice, smooth handover, it's critical if you're looking for repeat business with that same client.
Yeah, that's huge. This is a bonus question, how much of your experiences in the field through the commissioning process gets back to the design and the engineers?
A lot of it. I mean, we're in the process today. In fact, I'm in the process of talking to some things that we have noticed on actually more than one of our sites that is concerning to us with some implications that the design may not have been wrong. The execution in the field may have been wrong, or vice versa, and we don't know that. So we bring things like that back to our design team almost immediately and start the investigation. It also goes into a lessons learned file that some people put a lot of stock in that. Some groups, they may have a lessons learned folder somewhere, but they never actually open it and look at it. So it's kind of pointless to even keep it, but we do. We look at lessons learned from project to project. Our designs and our builds are so similar that I think it's much easier for us than for a pharmaceutical company that is building for Bayer one day and they're building for Pfizer the next day, which may be totally and completely different products and designs and things like that. I think ours is much easier to drill in on those lessons learned and get that back to design quickly so that we don't repeat the same mistakes on the next build.
Well, this has been fantastic, Tim. I appreciate you taking the time. I think this is kind of some of the information I wish I would have had earlier in my career. I think the last question I normally ask is, looking back from what you've learned now through your career, what's one piece of advice you'd offer to yourself, kind of entering into the industry?
don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to step up and say, hey, maybe this isn't the best way to do things. Let's think of something else.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Tim, thanks for your time, man. I know you're a busy man, and you do a lot of traveling, so appreciate you slotting this in.
All right. Thanks a lot. It's good to be with you.